Okay, so today I wanted to review some slides that I had put together last year on DNC 132 entitled DNC 132 Authentic Revelation or Later Forgery. So this revelation really is one of the key documents that determines whether Joseph Smith taught and practiced polygamy, because this document both demonstrates that he taught it, but also that he was practicing it. And it's just a very, it's 66 verses long. It's a very in-depth, theologically rich section of the Doctrine and Covenants. You could spend hours talking about it, going into the different theological aspects of it, different historical aspects of it, because there's a lot of history that's contextually around DNC 132. But this is just going to be a brief overview of the reasons why I believed it to be an authentic revelation that came from Joseph Smith, and why most historians also believe it to be an authentic revelation, even though Brigham Young did not publish it until 1852. So it's indisputable that Joseph Smith had a revelation in 1843 regarding plural marriage and eternal marriage. Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum at the Nauvoo City Council in June of 1844, in response to the Nauvoo Expositor, didn't call them a bunch of liars. They said that they were twisting and misinterpreting what this revelation was. So they didn't deny that there was an authentic revelation in the summer of 1843. They just tried to say it was about polygamy in former times, not the present, and it was about eternal marriage, is what Joseph Smith really emphasized. And he said eternal polygamy, where according to the keys of the holy priesthood, man can have a wife on earth and have one in heaven. And he accused William Law of trying to make a criminality of that. So we have contemporary evidence of a revelation was received by Joseph Smith, written in two different journals, both Joseph Smith's journal as well as William Clayton's journal. So in Joseph Smith's journal, Wednesday, July 12th, received a revelation in the office in the presence of Hyrum and William Clayton. And then in William Clayton's journal, this AM, I wrote a revelation consisting of 10 pages on the order of the priesthood, showing the designs of Moses, Abraham, David, and Solomon having many wives and concubines. So there was a revelation. The debate really is what was the substance and contents of that revelation. So the Nauvoo Expositor affidavits were made in May of 1844 and published in the Nauvoo Expositor on June 7th, 1844. And they describe and corroborate key details about DNC 132. Among the things that about DNC 132 verified, William Law recalls it told Joseph that this is the law and to enter into my law, referencing verses 32 through 34. Jane Law recalled that it authorized some men to have up to 10 wives, and that the women who did not allow their husbands to have more than one wife would be under transgression before God, referencing verses 61 through 65. So Austin Cowles recalled that the revelation Hyrum Smith read to the High Council taught sealing up to eternal life against all sins except the shedding of innocent blood, verse 26, and that David and Solomon had many wives, yet in this they sinned not, save in the matter of Uriah, verses 39 through 38 and 39. So just to show this, so this is William Law's statement, and this is it's color coded to show what sections what parts of DNC 132 it's referencing. So William Law, May 4th, 1844, published in the Nauvoo Expositor, he said, I hereby certify that Hyrum Smith did in his office read to me a certain written document which he said was a revelation from God. He said he was with Joseph when it was received. He afterwards gave me the document to read, and I took it to my house and read it and showed it to my wife and returned it next day. The revelation so-called authorized certain men to have more wives than one at a time in this world and in the world to come. It said this was the law and commanded Joseph to enter into the law, also that he should administer to others. Several other items were in the revelation supporting the above doctrines. So that's interesting. Several other items in the revelation supporting the above doctrines. So in William Law's interview in the 1880s, he said he didn't recall the theological introduction, and it was much shorter. But here in his earlier statement, he says there were other things in the revelation supporting the above doctrines, which, fits that there is a big theological introduction to the plural marriage. And instead of in the 1880s, he tries to say that he only recalled reading the command for Joseph and other high priests to enter into polygamy was what, but we'll get to that statement later. But anyhow, it's color coded. You can see he's referencing things in the early verses, as well as, like verse 19 about it's going to be for time and all eternity. Verses 32 saying, do the works of Abraham, enter into my law. And verse 37, it's says that many of these servants received this law and were authorized in practicing polygamy. Verse 48, and Joseph, I'm going, whoever you give to any on my word by my word and according to my law, it shall be visited with blessings and not cursings. So, pretty significant statement by William Law. His wife Jane, in her affidavit, says, I certify that I read the revelation referred to in the above affidavit of my husband. It sustained in strong terms the doctrine of more wives than one at a time in this world and in the next. It authorized some to have the number 10 and set forth that those women who would not allow their husbands to have more wives than one should be under condemnation before God. So she's, again, referencing the theological introduction. It's sustained in strong terms. It's referencing that there was a big, there was theological justification for this. It wasn't just a command to enter into it. So D&C 132 verse 62 is where she's remembering it references up to 10 virgins given to him by this law. And then verses 64 and 65 said that women who would not allow their husbands to have more wives than one should be under condemnation before God. And it says, if any man have a wife who holds the keys of this power and he teaches her the law of my priesthood as pertaining to these things, then shall she believe in and minister unto him, or she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord your God. For I will destroy her, for I will magnify my name upon all those who receive and abide in my law. And then it goes on to say, if she receive not this law, it is lawful for him to receive all things whatsoever I, the Lord his God, will give unto him, because she did not believe and administer unto him according to my word, then she becomes the transgressor. So again, she verifies what's in verses 61, 62, 64, 65. So probably the most significant affidavit, however, comes from Austin Cowles, who in his expositor affidavit goes into a bit more detail, kind of summarizing it rather than just remembering key parts like William Law and Jane Law. And so this is, Austin Cowles was a member of the Nauvoo High Council, and he's saying that this was read to the High Council by Hyrum Smith in the summer of 1843, and he gives a description of it. It says, to all whom it may concern, for inasmuch as the public mind has been given much agitation by a course of procedure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints by a number of persons declaring against certain doctrines and practices therein, among whom I am one, it is but meet that I should give my reasons, at least in part, for the cause, as a cause that have led me to declare myself. In the later part of the summer of 1843, the Patriarch Hyrum Smith did in the High Council, of which I was a member, introduced what he said was a revelation given through the prophet. The said Hyrum Smith did essay to read the said revelation in the said council, that according to his reading, there was contained the following doctrines. First, the sealing up of persons to eternal life against all sins, save the shedding of innocent blood or of consenting thereto. Second, the doctrine of plurality of wives, or marrying virgins, and that David and Solomon had many wives, yet in this they sinned not, save in the matter of Uriah. This revelation, with other evidences that have heretofore heresies were taught and practiced in the church, determined me to leave the office of first counselor to the president of the church at Nauvoo, inasmuch as I dared not teach or administer such laws. And so he's clearly in purple, referencing D&C 132, verse 26, about being sealed up against all sin, save the shedding of innocent blood. And yet they shall come forth in the first resurrection, but they shall be destroyed in the flesh and shall be delivered into the buffetings of Satan till the day of redemption. And then he quotes verses 38. That David and Solomon had many wives, that in this they sin not, save in the matter of Uriah. And so verses 38 through 39, David also received many wives and concubines, and also Solomon, and Moses my servant, as also many others of my servants from the beginning of creation until this time. And nothing did they sin, save in those things which they received not of me. David's wives and concubines were given unto him by me by the hand of Nathan, my servant, and others of the prophets, who had the keys of this power. And in none of these things did he sin against me, save in the case of Uriah and his wife. And therefore he hath fallen from his exaltation, receiveth his portion, and he shall not inherit them out of the world, for I gave them unto another, saith the Lord. And then again, he says the doctrine, the plurality of wives or marrying virgins, is laid out in verses 61, which is also right there. If any man espouse a virgin and desire to espouse another, the first give her consent. If he espouse the second, they are virgins and vowed to no other man, then he is justified. For he can't commit adultery, for they are given unto him. He can't commit adultery with that belongeth unto him and to no one else. And 62, and if he have 10 virgins given to him by this law, he cannot commit adultery, for they belong to him and they're given unto him. For therefore he is he justified. So the question is, so Joseph and Hyrum, the question is whether these denials are reliable or not. And so what complicates, why there is even this discussion of whether the affidavits are accurate or not is that Joseph and Hyrum gave some non-denials, or gave some denials that were kind of non-denials, I would argue, in response. So in the Nauvoo City Council confirmed that these statements were not completely fabricated out of nothing, but indeed there was a revelation received and read to the Nauvoo High Council, as Austin Cowles testified. Hyrum's statements and Joseph's appear contradictory. Hyrum emphasized that the revelation was about polygamy in former days and not the present. Joseph emphasized that the revelation had to do with eternal marriage, also implicit eternal polygamy, having a wife on earth while he has one in heaven, according to the keys of the holy priesthood. Significantly, while accusations of immorality and affidavits against the Nauvoo dissenters were made, read, and included in the city council minutes, Joseph and Hyrum, in my opinion, very significantly did not either publish this new revelation or even read it to the city council. And then, so it begs the question, that would be the easiest way to debunk the Nauvoo expositor testimony, is to just publish this revelation. So the big question is, why wasn't this revelation published in 1843? And when it was received or even publicly acknowledged as being a new revelation. And the second one is, after the 1844 controversy about the revelation, why wasn't it published in 1844? If you really wanted to just show that these guys weren't telling the truth, you should have just published the revelation. But the reality is, the revelation, in my opinion, the reality is the revelation said exactly what the Nauvoo dissenters said it was, and that is the key. That is why they didn't publish the revelation, in my opinion. I don't see any other justifiable reason why it was never published in 1843 or in 1844 by Joseph and Hyrum. And so these minutes about in response to the Nauvoo dissenters were published in the Nauvoo Neighbor on June 19th, 1844. So I've got those statements. So Counselor, June 8th and June 10th were the two meetings where they discussed the revelation and the Nauvoo expositor. So Counselor H. Smith referred to the revelation read to the High Council of the Church, which has caused so much talk about multiplicity of wives, that said revelation was answered to a question concerning things in former days and had no reference to the present time. So it's you could actually say he's kind of being truthful, because it wasn't to the church in general at that time, but it was to select individuals who were authorized by Joseph to enter into the practice. So, you could say in a sense that he's not lying, he's just kind of bending the truth a bit but he's, the question concerning things in former days, that's right in D&C 132 verse 1. So that was June 8th, and then June 10th, we have some significant statements that even more detail. Mayor Joseph Smith said they make a criminality for a man to have a wife on the earth while he is one in heaven, according to the keys of the holy priesthood. And he then read a statement of William Laws from the expositor, where the truth of God was transformed into a lie concerning the thing. He then read several statements of Austin Cowles and the expositor concerning a private interview, and said he never had any private conversation with Austin Cowles on these subjects. They preached from the stand from the Bible, showing the order in ancient days, having nothing to do with the present time. So breaking this one down, significant, he says, having a man to have a wife on earth while he's one in heaven, according to the keys of the holy priesthood. So Hyrum announced at the April 1844 General Conference that Joseph held the sealing power to seal eternal marriages, and that Joseph had sealed them to both his living wife and his deceased wife. And that appears to be what Joseph is saying here again at the June 10th, 1844 City Council meeting, that you can have a wife on earth and in heaven both sealed to you. And that's referenced in the Jacob Scott letter in January 1844. It's referenced in the Times and Seasons in November of 1844. And then also, I understand the Nauvoo Neighbor in February of 1845 also references this doctrine of eternal polygamy was announced by Hyrum, even though he's still saying, we're not authorizing earthly polygamy, we're just authorizing eternal polygamy. So, but it's the theological foundation is there in D&C 132. So, and then he goes on to say he didn't have a private interview with Austin Cowles, which is true, but Austin Cowles wasn't saying that Joseph was the one who read the revelation. He said it was Hyrum who was. He didn't say anything about Joseph. And then what's interesting is the smile part. He said he preached from the stand from the Bible, showing the order in ancient days having nothing to do with the present time. So there are later recollections saying that Joseph had at one time taught about polygamy in a public sermon, but then had to backtrack and kind of take it back afterwards because of some of the women being upset about it. And so this seems to be a corroborating statement where contemporary in Joseph Smith's lifetime, saying that he had taught polygamy at some time on the stand from the Bible, which is interesting. So again, Counselor H. Smith proceeded to show the falsehood of Austin Cowles in relation to the revelation referred to. It was reference to former days, not the present time, as related to by Cowles. So he again reiterates this is about ancient polygamy. So Joseph is like, this is about having a wife on earth while in heaven, according to the keys of the priesthood. Byram saying it's about ancient polygamy. And then Joseph, in his final statement, said he had never preached the revelation in private as he had in public, had not taught it to the anointed in the church in private, which statement many present confirmed that on inquiring concerning the passage in the resurrection, concerning they neither marry nor are given in marriage, etc., he received for answer that men in this life must marry in view of eternity, otherwise they must remain as angels or be single in heaven, which was the doctrine the revelation referred to. And the mayor spoke at considerable length in explanation of this principle, was willing to, for one, to subscribe his name to declare the expositor and the whole establishment a nuisance. So, first part, he says that he had never preached the revelation in private as he had in public. He not taught to the anointed in the church in private, which statement many present confirmed. That's referencing he never taught the revelation to D&C 132 to the anointed quorum. And there's decent reason to believe that that's true because first he had William Law, who was in Hyrum in 1842 in the anointed quorum who were opposed to polygamy. Hyrum didn't convert to polygamy until May of 1843. And then Emma was brought in September of 1843 into the anointed quorum. And so Joseph had people in his anointed quorum who were opposed to polygamy. Brigham Young recalled that Joseph felt trapped in there, unfortunately, that he couldn't really teach all the principles he wanted to because there was opposition. And Brigham recalled that William Law made a comment in the quorum saying that if angel of heaven tried to teach him polygamy and he had it in his power, he would kill him. And so he was that opposed to polygamy that he would even threaten to kill an angel from heaven if he could do so, if it were to try to teach him polygamy. So, but then he confirms the eternal marriage aspect of the revelation, that on inquiring concerning the passage in the resurrection, concerning they neither marry nor given in marriage, he received for an answer, men in this life must vary in view of eternity, otherwise they must remain as angels or single in heaven. So that's, clearly laying out the need to be sealed in this mortality in order to receive the blessings of eternal marriage. And Joseph was saying that they neither marry nor are given in marriage, is saying that all marriages must be contracted in this life and not in the resurrection. They couldn't be in the next life or after the resurrection. It had to be done by people in mortality, and that's arguably why proxy marriages was introduced as a doctrine by Joseph Smith, which Hyrum Smith said his living wife stood as proxy for his deceased wife to be sealed to him as well. So those are their statements. So the question comes, who is telling the truth? The Nauvoo dissenters saying that it was about polygamy in the present, or Joseph and Hyrum saying that it didn't really have to do with polygamy in the present, just eternal marriage and ancient polygamy. So some significant witnesses from Utah, the Brighamites, include William Clayton and Joseph Kingsbury, were both scribes for this revelation. Both gave their testimony that D&C 132 was indeed a Nauvoo revelation of Joseph Smith. William Clayton said the Kingsbury copy was true and correct. That was a true and correct copy. In 1869, several Nauvoo City Council Nauvoo High Council members, Thomas Grover, James Allred, and Aaron Johnson, all signed affidavits saying that D&C 132 was indeed read to them and other members of the Nauvoo High Council on or about August 12, 1843. They gave testimony at other occasions as well. I think Aaron Johnson actually gave a statement in the early 1850s describing Hyrum reading the revelation to the High Council. So, James Allred gave one in the 1850s on October 15th, 1854, saying, "At a meeting of the Nauvoo High Council in Nauvoo, Brother Hyrum Smith read the revelation relating to the plurality of wives. He, James Allred, said he did not believe it at first. It was so contrary to his feelings. But he said he knew Joseph a prophet of God, so he made a covenant that he would not eat, drink, or sleep until he knew for himself that he got testimony that until that he had got a testimony." That is what James Allred related on the night of the 15th of October, 1854. It was true that he had, this quote is kind of messed up. He had got a testimony that it was true that he even heard the voice of God concerning it. This is what James Allred related on the night of the 15th of October, 1854. That's a statement in the LDS Church Archives. Hosea Stout, a clerk for the Nauvoo High Council, recalled that in August 1843, D&C 132 was read to the council, but he was excused on other business during the reading and wasn't present during it being read. He was just told about the Revelation's description from several of the High Council members afterwards. And Hosea Stout related this to Joseph F. Smith in 1883 in response. I think Joseph F. Smith was trying to get all the witnesses he could to plural marriage compiled. And so Hosea Stout was the clerk who was keeping the minutes of the council. And this is what he wrote to Joseph F. Smith. Quote, "I can very well remember that in the year 1843, and I think in the month of August, but I'm not certain as to the date, the High Council met at President Hyrum Smith. Your father, as we were expecting, came into the council with the document said to be the revelation on plural marriage for the purpose of reading it to the council. I was clerk of the council at the time and supposed it would be filed in the council for their future use. At the very time, I had another appointment to meet and was excused by the council, supposing it would be filed there and come in to my hands as a clerk, and I can then peruse it at my leisure. I returned, the council had adjourned, and your father had gone, taking the revelation with him. But I saw several of the counselors who informed me as to the purport of the revelation, which corresponds to what was published and is now in the Book of Doctrine and Covenants. Certain is it was the one particular town topic of both friends and enemies." So there's some other. So this is significant. The men in Utah would date it to about the August 12th, 1843 meeting of the Nauvoo High Council. And so the minutes for that council, they simply record, "Council met according to the adjournment Hyrum Smith's office. No business for the council. Teaching by Presidents Hyrum Smith and William Marks." And so it doesn't give too much detail. It's just saying that Hyrum Smith and William Marks gave some teachings to the council, very vague about what they were teaching. But what's significant, in my opinion, is Franklin D. Richards, in his Scriptural Items notebook on August 12, 1843, wrote, quote, "Hyrum said before the High Council that no prophet ever did transgress, but was directed by the impulse of the Spirit involuntary. Also, he said that a man shall take his brother's wife and raise up seed unto him, as it was in Israel, must be again established." Referencing Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 through 10, the one place in the law of Moses where polygamy is commanded, where a man is to raise up seed to his brother if his brother dies without an heir in Israel. And so he's recording that Hyrum taught this to the High Council. So this is showing that indeed Hyrum did teach earthly polygamy would be needed to be restored, as it was in Israel, must be again established. In the Nauvoo residence, Sarah Scott wrote letters to her parents in June and July 1844, confirming that her brother-in-law Jesse Haven had the plural marriage revelation taught to the elders quorum by Hyrum Smith. We have another letter by Jacob Scott writes to his daughter about in January of 1844 about there being a revelation, new revelations that have been received relating to relating to eternal marriage and eternal polygamy. He said there was many more other things about it that he couldn't write on paper to her, but that she should be careful not to oppose anything of that came from God. And so that's another significant evidence there. This reading to the High Council and reading to the Elders Quorum is referenced by William Law in the Nauvoo City Council meetings in early January of 1844. And Joseph didn't deny what William Law said. He just kind of, the minutes just record that he basically said that a man who promised to keep a secret and couldn't keep it wasn't to be trusted, in response to William Law's comments about saying that the spiritual wife business was blowed up before by Joseph and Hyrum to the High Council and to the Elders Quorum. And so Sarah Scott was referencing Jesse Haven was a person who told her that it was read to the Elders Quorum. He was a member of the Nauvoo Elders Quorum. So significant, the Brighamite testimony should be compelling in and of itself, as well as the contemporary sources about it. But if that's not enough to be the nail in the coffin, the non-Brighamite testimony should definitely be the nail in the coffin, confirming that D&C 132 is an authentic revelation, was what Joseph Smith received in Nauvoo. So we have 3 different individuals who didn't follow Brigham Young. Austin Cowles, William Marks, and Leonard Soby all testified to a revelation of plural marriage being read by Hyrum Smith to the Nauvoo High Council. We read Austin Cowles' statement. William Marks and Leonard Soby are significant because William Marks became a member of the RLDS Church First Presidency, and he was always opposed to polygamy, but he even admitted that Hyrum read the revelation on plural marriage to the High Council, and that he saw them receive it, but that he didn't. And then Leonard Soby didn't follow Brigham Young, but said followed Sidney Rigdon. And he also gave 2 affidavits saying that the revelation in Utah, to his best of his knowledge, was the same revelation that he heard Hyrum Smith read to him when he was a member of the Nauvoo High Council. So William Marks first, as his testimony is recalled by John Hawley. John Hawley's testimony of what Brother Marks said to him in July of 1868 at Plano, Kendall County, Illinois, on the subject of the polygamy revelation. I, John H., was a follower of Brigham Young at the time when the conversation came up between us on the subject of the revelation of 43 on polygamy. He told me he knew the very day the revelation was given and said one morning Brother Hyrum was walking down the street pretty fast. I hailed him and said, Brother Hyrum, which way? And he told me he was going down to Joseph and was going to get a revelation on patriarchal marriage today if we can. And in the evening, he came along and back and handed him the revelation, asked him to call the High Council together and read it to them, and said Brother Marks did so and asked them to express their belief or disbelief. And the High Council all said they believed it to be of God, but he did not. And from that time, he said the leading man of the church looked upon him as on the eve of apostasy. So if you remember, the Nauvoo City Council Nauvoo High Council minutes for August 12, 1843 said teachings by Hyrum Smith and William Marks. This account seems to fit perfectly with that, because it's Brother Marks is saying that Hyrum had him read it to them. So Hyrum had William Marks read the revelation. So that's why it would say teachings by Hyrum and William Marks. But he didn't believe it to be of God, even though the council did. And from that time, he said the leading men of the church looked upon him as on the eve of apostasy. So that's in John Hawley's autobiography in the Community of Christ Library Archives. So similarly, William Marks gave his testimony in the private RLDS church presidency meeting with their church leaders. It says, the minutes say, quote, the question arose as to whether Joseph the martyr taught the doctrine of polygamy. President Marks said that Brother Hyrum came to his place once and told him he did not believe in it, and he was going to see Joseph about it, and if he had a revelation on the subject, he would believe it. And after that, Hyrum read a revelation on it in the High Council, and he, Marks, felt it was not true, but he saw the High Council received it. So that was on May 1st, 1865, in the private meeting of the RLDS Church First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. So we have William Marks is another non-Brighamite corroborating it. So Zenos Gurley Jr. is a fascinating story because he was an apostle in the RLDS Church, but he grew disaffected over this issue because he came to believe that that Joseph Smith did indeed teach and practice polygamy. His father-in-law was Ebenezer Robinson, and Ebenezer Robinson gave many statements and signed several affidavits in his lifetime saying Hyrum Smith indeed taught me plural marriage in the fall of 1843 or in November or December. He didn't remember exactly when, but Hyrum taught it to him and he rejected it at the time, and Hyrum was disappointed in him for rejecting it. So Zenos Gurley Jr. apparently heard about Leonard Sobey, and he was the one who went and met with Leonard Sobey to see if he would confirm or deny whether the Utah revelation was the same revelation that was read in the Nauvoo High Council. And so he said he met with him. Brother Sobey swore positively on or about the August 12th, 1843, Hyrum Smith, the brother of the prophet Joseph Smith, presented and read to the High Council the revelation on polygamy, bore his testimony to its truth in the name of the Lord, and enjoined its keeping, or words to the effect. Mr. Sobey opposed it, and he, with Austin Cowles and William Marks, I believe, rejected it all, which caused their separation from the church finally. And so Zenos Gurley Jr. considered this testimony damning enough that he resigned his apostleship in the RLDS Church over it. And so he got an affidavit by Sobey, and then Sobey signed a second affidavit in 1886, a couple years after this first affidavit, and he said, "Be it remembered on the 23rd day of March in the year 1886, before Joshua W. Roberts, notary public for the city of Beverly County, Burlington, state of New Jersey, Leonard Sobey of said city, county, and his state was by me duly sworn, and upon his oath said, that on or about the 12th day of August, 1843, I was a resident of Nauvoo, Hancock County, state of Illinois, and being a member of the High Council of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, was present in the meeting of said council at the time here above stated. Thomas Grover, Alpheus Cutler, David Fulmer, William Huntington, and others. When Elder Hyrum Smith, after certain explanations, read the revelation on celestial marriage. I've read and examined carefully said revelation, since published in the Book of Doctrine and Covenants of said church, and say to the best of my knowledge and belief, it is the same word for word as the revelation then read by Hyrum Smith. The respondent said further that the revelation did not originate with Brigham Young, as some persons have falsely stated, but was received by the prophet Joseph Smith and read to the High Council by his authority as a revelation to the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. When read to this despondent and said, High Council, I believed it was a revelation from Jesus Christ. I believe it now. So key statement there. I've read and examined carefully said revelation since published in the Book of Doctrine and Covenants of said church, and say to the best of my knowledge and belief, it is the same word for word as the revelation then read by Hyrum Smith. So just to cover another tangent issue that's kind of related, is there seem to have been shorter versions and longer versions of D&C 132 in circulation. But this isn't strange. This shouldn't be seen as strange because we know that other revelations had different versions. That there was revelations who were expanded upon at other times. And you can see that if you study the differences between the Book of Commandments and the Doctrine and Covenants in the 1833 Book of Commandments and 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. So William Clayton's original copy was 10 full scrap pages, according to his journal, which, that's the earliest source about the length of the revelation. And so that fits it being a longer revelation. So Joseph Kingsbury's copy he made of the revelation for Bishop Newell K. Whitney was 8 pages long and is still extant to this day. So we know the original copy was burned, but this copy is the one that is still extant. And this one's an 8 pages long copy, either penmanship or different size of paper made it be a couple pages difference in length. So some people think that this might be an anomaly, that Newell K. Whitney took a personal copy of this revelation. But the reality is Newell K. Whitney kept copies of many other revelations. I was just recently reading about the history of the Book of Commandments and the Doctrine and Covenants, and Oliver Cowdery, when they were working on republishing the Revelations in the Evening and Morning Star, he actually wrote to Newell K. Whitney to ask for original copies of, or early copies of Revelations that Newell K. Whitney had been keeping. And so Newell K. Whitney sent those to Oliver Cowdery so that he could use those in republishing Revelations. That was in 1834, 1835. So Horace K. Whitney significantly made a copy of the Kingsbury version of D&C 132 on March 14th, 1847. It's also 8 pages long and it's still extant. He made 2 copies kind of, but he didn't finish the first one. He kind of started over and made the second one. And this was because Newell K. Whitney was being asked to turn over the revelation to Brigham Young in winter quarters. And so Horace K. Whitney, as Newell K. Whitney's oldest son, was asked or instructed to make a copy for them to still have a copy for their own family's Revelations collection. So there were some individuals who noted they saw a shorter version of the Revelation that was like 2 or 3 pages long. Mercy Fielding Thompson, James Whitehead, and William Law. And so these are sometimes used by people to say this is our smoking gun that that this was a modified revelation, because these individuals said they saw a shorter revelation. We're talking about, they focus mostly on James Whitehead and William Law, where these are guys in the 1880s who are trying to remember back to 40 years earlier, and they're using, at the same time they will discount other late testimonies being late. Their key argument is based off of these 2 men in the 1880s, and what James Whitehead in the 1890s, when he was cross-examined on the subject and they tried to ask him which parts were original and which parts were modified, he couldn't tell them what was modified, and he basically had to admit that the revelation he must have saw that was only front and back page had to have been a totally different revelation. And significantly, he said he was talking about revelation. He was shown in winter quarters by Newell K. Whitney, and he said that it was dated July of 1842. He emphasized 1842. And what's significant about that is there was a July 1842 revelation that was a 1-page front and back revelation that Newell K. Whitney had, and that was the revelation for Sarah Ann Whitney to marry Joseph Smith. And so if James Whitehead was telling the truth, I want to be charitable with him. I think that he was remembering the July 27th, 1842 revelation for Sarah Ann Whitney to marry Joseph Smith, is what he was shown in winter quarters by Newell K. Whitney. But what's significant is he also, in his earlier 1880 statement, he said he saw the original in Joseph Smith's handwriting that was copied. He saw an original revelation in Joseph Smith's handwriting that was copied by William Clayton, and that was burned. So he contradicts himself. He isn't really the most reliable witness, especially when he's testifying against polygamy in the 1880s, 1890s, when earlier he had privately told our LDS leaders that he knew that Joseph had taught and practiced polygamy, and that Emma consented and put wives' hands in Joseph's hands. That's covered in one of my previous videos, his credibility and his statements in that regard. And then, William Law and Mercy Thompson, I believe what they may have seen is that Hyrum, instead of giving out the entire full, 8 or 10 page revelation to others, he probably only gave a couple pages at a time, like probably just the key parts of it, like the later parts commanding polygamy is what he may have loaned to what Mercy Fielding Thompson may have seen and what William Law probably saw, if his memory is accurate. But again, as I mentioned, his earlier statement implied there was a lot of other things in the revelation to support the doctrine of the plurality of wives. So, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they saw maybe he saw the longer version and he was only lent the shorter part of it. That's kind of, a theory that's been postulated by some about that. So interestingly, Lyman White reportedly had a longer version of D&C 132, according to Gideon Carter, a version of the revelation containing, quote, many rules governing plural marriage, which fits with the D&C 132 ending, saying, and now, as pertaining to this law, verily, verily, I say unto you, I will reveal more unto you hereafter. Therefore, let this suffice for the present. And William Clayton saying, after the whole was written, Joseph asked me to read it through slowly and carefully, which I did, and he pronounced it correct. He then remarked that there was much more that he could write on the same subject, but that was what was written was sufficient for the present. So, to be honest, Gideon Carter's kind of ambiguous. He said Gideon Carter said that Lyman White published a pamphlet that purported to contain the plural marriage revelation, but he said there were many rules in it that he did not find in the Utah church's revelation. And so, I think that's implying that it was the same revelation, but had a bunch of more rules attached to it. And Brigham Young was aware of similar rules, which is something to discuss in a different video. So, regardless, with William Law's late recollection, his shorter revelation, he said that he was shown, he said the contents are substantially the same, but there was not the theological introduction. The thing simply consists in the command of doing it, and that command was restricted to the high priesthood and to virgins and widows. But as to Joseph himself, the Lord's chosen servant, it was restricted to virgins only, to clean vessels from which to procure a pure seed for the Lord. So that's in his interview with the Salt Lake Tribune on March 30th, 1887. And he said, I was astonished to see your book. The revelation was such a long document. I remember distinctly the original given me by Hyrum was much shorter, covered not more than 2 or 3 pages of full scrap. The contents were substantially the same, but there was not the theological introduction. So he's still saying it was about polygamy. It was about plural marriage, but he doesn't remember the theological introduction being in the pages that Hyrum let him borrow. But significantly also confirmed, so that part confirmed, verses 52 about, those given to servant Joseph need to be virtuous and pure, which is what he's remembering as virgins only, to clean vessels. But he also recalled Emma corroborating verse 54. He said, the question was, what do you remember of Emma's relation to the revelation on celestial marriage? Well, I told you that she used to complain to me about Joseph's escapades whenever she met me on the street. She spoke repeatedly about that pretended revelation. She said once, the revelation says I must submit or be destroyed. Well, I guess I have to submit. So that's referencing verse 54, saying, I command my handmaiden Emma Smith to abide and cleave unto my servant Joseph and to none else. But if she will not abide this commandment, she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord. For I am the Lord thy God, and will destroy her if she abide not in my law. So one other key thing from non-Brighamite sources that to me confirms that D&C 132 was indeed the revelation that Joseph Smith had, and it wasn't a non-polygamist revelation about eternal marriage or just about polygamy in the ancient times, is that Emma and her family privately preserved a tradition that she and Joseph indeed burned the revelation. So this is from Linda King Newell's article, The Emma Smith Lore Reconsidered, and she has 3 different sources showing that this was, that this tradition was preserved. So first one is William E. McClellan to Joseph III in July of 1874. He recalled that in 1847, Emma told him that Joseph, quote, wished her to get up and burn the revelation. She refused to touch it, even with tongs. He rose up from the bed and pulled open the fire with his finger, put the revealment in, and burned it up. Now, William McClellan of himself, I wouldn't consider a reliable source. I think everything he said is true, but it's because it can be corroborated from other sources. So Joseph Smith III apparently seemed to believe this was true, or either James White had believed that it was true that there was a copy of the Revelation burned, because he wrote in his diary on April 20th, 1885, visited James White and had a long and interesting chat with him. He says he saw the revelation, about 1 page, full scrap paper in father's handwriting. William Clayton copied it, and it was this copy that mother burned. So, and this was quoted by Adentia Anderson in a letter to Paul Hansen on October 13th, 1931. This is in a letter in the Community of Christ Library archives. So that doesn't really, that's short and kind of ambiguous. Who was saying that that Emma burned the revelation there, whether it was James Whitehead or Joseph III. But what's significant is Samuel Smith's daughter wrote to Don Carlos Smith's daughter privately. So this is Mary Bailey Smith Norman to Ina Coolbrith in March 27th, 1908, saying, I suppose you've heard that Aunt Emma burnt the revelation, which I suppose was so. I have heard my Aunt Lucy, so Joseph Smith's sister, say that Emma would not touch it with her fingers, but took the tongs to put it in the fire. This is very similar to William McClellan saying that, the referencing a story with tongs and putting it in the fire. Again, this is published by Linda King Newell in Dialogue magazine, The Emma Smith Lore Reconsidered. And, this raises a serious question. Why would Emma and Joseph, or, Joseph consenting to Emma wanting the revelation destroyed, why would Emma want the revelation destroyed so bad if it didn't teach polygamy in the present time? I think that this is a compelling reason, along with all the other ones I listed, to believe that D&C 132 indeed was the revelation that Emma burned. And that was the revelation that Joseph Smith received in 1843 and was read by Hyrum Smith to the Nauvoo High Council. So that ends my presentation. If you like it, please like and subscribe. We'll be having other videos covering other content that relates to the subject of addressing polygamy denial. Thanks.